Good. Now, when you come in this morning, I handed you a slip of paper on it, and it just put down your goals for 2010. And the reason I did that is because we're starting out a brand new year, and throughout this new year, most people do make some type of a New Year's resolution. They have a dream or they have a vision, maybe of something that they desire a personal change throughout this new coming year. And New Year's Eve has always been a time really to look back at the past, but yet even more importantly, it's a time that we're to look forward to the new coming year, because we don't want to dwell on things that we did last year. We look back and we say, thank you, Lord, for your faithfulness and your goodness. Lord, there were some areas that maybe I fell short in, and Lord, there are some areas that I want to improve this upcoming year. Because we know as a Christian, we always constantly have to be moving forward. A church always has to be growing, because if you're not moving forward or not growing, that means you're standing still. And technically, when you're standing still, you're just gradually moving backwards. So we all have to constantly be shooting forward, whether it be our personal lives or whether it be as a corporate group, as a church. So hopefully here in the year 2010, each one of us will make some changes to help us follow through on maybe some areas that we fell short in last year. So I went through and I shared last week about, with the church here, how many people felt that maybe they had a New Year's resolution in year 2010. And a couple of people shared. One was to learn patience. And somebody laughed and said, you better be careful about praying for that, because the Lord would give you some trials and difficulties to teach you patience through that. But we heard all different types of things that people had said last week. But I wrote down the top 10 2010 New Year's dreams or resolutions, however you want to say it, for 2010. Number one was to spend more time with family and friends. This was a national survey that was taken. Now, I went to about 4 to 5 different websites to see if they all listed something different. Every single one of them listed the same 10, but some of them were in different orders. So it may be first on this website, but on another one it may have been second or third. But on this particular one, number one New Year's resolution was to spend more time with family and friends. And number two was more people want to get fit or get into fitness. And the reason why was because it just has more health benefits. As we know, it helps risk cancers, it gives life longevity, it helps us maintain a weight loss, it helps you sleep at night, it enhances the mood. There's many different advantages to it. So to get more fit. So number one, spend more time with family and friends. Number two is fit and fitness. And number three was to tame the bulge, to lose weight was number three. It says that 66% of adult Americans are considered overweight or obese. And that is usually one of the number one commitments for people throughout the year, is to start losing weight. Number four was to quit smoking. So if you still do that, this is a good time to quit. Number five is to enjoy life a little bit more. Quit taking life so serious and stop and enjoy life a little bit and have fun. Mainly because so many people today are so stressed out between everything going on in their lives. I seen here where on CNN one night they had on that famous speaker, the motivation guy, Anthony Robbins. And Larry King had talked to Anthony Robbins, and he asked him, he says, what do you think is one of the biggest issues and problems with people today? And he said, their busyness. He said, if you walk up to 100 people in a hallway that you work with or something that you haven't seen in a month or two, and you say, hey, how you doing? Number one answer is busy. Busy. Boy, am I busy. Got too much going on. So that is a goal that a lot of people hope to have this year, is to enjoy life a little bit more. Number 6 was to quit drinking. Number 7 was to get out of debt. Mainly because debt was a big issue that causes a lot of stress in people's life. Number 8 was to learn something new. What they meant by this was maybe a career change, or maybe to some people to learn how to operate a computer. Other people, it may be to learn how to operate a cell phone. Other people, it just may be to learn a new language. But to learn something new this year. And number 9 was to help other people, which is really a non-selfish New Year's resolution, but it's to help other people, maybe whether it be like, Meals on Wheels or a food banquet or something along that line, but to help other people. And number 10 was to get organized. Now, I gave you a slip of paper when you came in, and I just asked you to write down what would your 2010 New Year's goal be, or your dream to be. And is it something like a successful career, or maybe buy a dream home, or maybe get out of debt, maybe lose some weight? There again, we said that some of them are even spiritual, maybe to help support more ministries, or maybe even take a missionary trip yourself. That is one of my goals that I would like to do, is take a missionary trip. I've never been out of the country on a missionary trip. And so I have contacted our home church, because they do about one a month, and just telling them to send me a copy of the list of the ones that they do this year. And I was hoping that maybe we could put together 2, 3, 4 people and go along with our home church and just get out and help somebody else. And I believe that would change a lot the way that we think about things also, is when we see just how blessed we are. Some people, their dream may be this year is to maybe teach a Bible. Either way, I just hope that as we go through the next couple of weeks, that some of the things that we'll be going over may encourage you to try to follow through, whatever it may be, but also to help you organize it and then to follow through with whatever you organize. Because without having some type of a plan and having goals, you know what a dream is? Just a dream. It's just something that never happens. Now, it could be whatever your personal goal may be, but it needs to be able to follow through. Now, where do dreams really even come from? Goals. I believe that the Lord is the greatest dream giver that there ever was. And what do I mean by that is because all throughout the Scriptures, when you look, you'll see where the Lord had given individual people dreams or visions to change your life and also to give them direction in life. Like Jacob, he received the confirmation of the Abrahamic covenant in a dream. Solomon received both wisdom and warning in a dream. Joseph received 3 messages in dreams. The wise men were warned of Herod's evil intentions in a dream. You can keep going right on down the list. Isaiah saw God's holiness in a vision. David was warned against judgment in a dream. You could just go all throughout the Scriptures, and there's areas that God has given people dreams and visions to direct and guide their lives. And I believe that the Lord does that to you and I as well. He did not stop just in that day, but He is a dream giver the same today. He can put a vision within each one of us, and most of us, I believe, would like to leave this world leaving some type of a mark on somebody. Most of us, you'd like to leave a mark maybe on your family. Some people, it would be able to leave a mark maybe on whatever type of industry or profession that you're in. Other people, it may be on a social group that they belong to. That is one of the most important things. I know that we had somebody here a while back, and their goal was they really enjoyed being in a quilt club. Well, that was really what their hobby was. Their dreams was become part of that club and be a leader in it. And so each one of us, whether your dream is just for you or whether it's for the church as a whole, we all still have dreams and visions, and we just need to pursue them. People who dream are people that you and I know of. People that had dreams and they accomplished those dreams are people that you and I remember them. Different people's dreams vary just as people's motives vary a lot. What do I mean by that? Because some people's dreams are for themselves, just strictly for me. Other people's dreams are what we call selfless dreams. They're dreams that help and better maybe their family, maybe help better their community, maybe better them help other people. But I think if you and I are honest, each one of us really have both of those kind of dreams within us, don't we? I know I've got dreams that I want to find personally, but also I know I got dreams that I'd like to hit as a corporate group, as a church. So each one of us have dreams and visions that the Lord gives within us. But how do we know whether our dreams are selfless or whether they're just strictly for us? And it's because of Matthew chapter 6, verse 33. This is how we start to discover the dream that God has for us. Matthew 6:33, Jesus says, "Seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you." So He's saying right through here in the Scripture, Jesus is telling us that if we seek His will for our lives, our dreams will fall into proper place. But the first thing to do is to seek the Lord. Lord, what do you have planned for me? Lord, what is it that you would like for me to do? So basically, we are to go to God and we're to say to God, God, how do you want me to spend my life? What is your purpose for creating me? And He says right through those verses, seek me first. And all those things will be added unto you. But here's the interesting part. You and I are to go to the Lord and ask Him, but then you and I then are to make those dreams fall into place. Well, what do I mean by that? Because we've been studying the Old Testament on Wednesday night, the book of Joshua. And remember, we had talked about how back in early times, the Lord had given Abraham the vision of the promised land. And then we studied about all the people that participated in getting to the promised land. Well, now in the book of Joshua, they are in the promised land. God has already given it to them, but what do they have to do then? They have to go and take it. God's given it to them, but then they have to make it happen themselves. They had to go take it over. We talked about just last Wednesday night, Joshua chapter 11, where Joshua went through and they conquered all the main armies of that time, the main backbone. And it says that he took out the real heavy-duty powers, but yet he left the small armies still left, so that when they go through and they divide up the land and they give it to the Israelites, then the Israelites, them individual groups, will then have to go over and conquer that small area. But the hardest part's been done. They've tackled the main backbone of that the armies of the land of Canaan. So you and I were to move forward when we feel that the Lord has given us a goal or a vision. Like I said, whether it's personally or as a corporate group, then we're starting to move forward and try to make things happen. Now, some people say, well, I don't know if I really have to make things happen, because if it's of the Lord, it's just automatically going to fall into place. Well, share that with the Apostle Paul, or share that with Joshua, or share that with Abraham, that just because the Lord had given them vision, that doesn't mean that they have to do anything. Well, if we studied the Scriptures, we know that that's not true. The Lord would give us a vision, but then we still have to follow through and go for that vision that the Lord had given us. It doesn't work for us to say, whatever's to be, will be. Now, you and I have to move forward in some type of an organized way. And the reason I say organized, remember what Joshua did? It says that while King Jabab was up there on the mountaintop and he called in all these other nations, they were meeting up on top of this hill that was 4,000 feet above sea level. They were meeting up there, putting together a war tactic to go down off of the mountain to attack the Israelites. But Joshua come up with a plan. He got organized and he says, you know what? They're up on top of this mountain up there. They've got about 300,000 soldiers. They've got 20,000 chariots. And we talked about all the different armory that he had. And so we said that if he would have come down, they could have taken those chariots and they could have eliminated a lot of the Israelites, because not only did they have 300,000 cavalry people, but they also had 20,000 chariots, and the chariots on the wheels had blades, curved blades that came out the wheels, so as the wheels turned, it was just like a lawnmower blade going around and around. So when they would run into a crowd of soldiers, those wheels would cut the feet off of the soldiers, off of the Israelites. Joshua, being a smart guy and strategist that he is, he says, hey, let's go get them on their own ground. Instead of waiting for them to come down and get us, let's go up the hill and get them. Because they were 4,000 feet above sea level, the land was very hilly. Chariots don't work good on the hilly countryside. So Joshua put together a plan, and they went up through there. So the reason I use that as an illustration is because sometimes we have to step out of our box. Sometimes we have to put our first foot forward and say, do you know what? I need to put together a plan, whatever vision it is that the Lord give me. Basically, we have to step out of the box, and that is an area that a lot of people find it very difficult to do because we've always done it that way, so we still need to continue it to be that way. We've always listened to that kind of music, so we need to listen to that kind of music. We've always dressed that way, so we need to dress that way. We've always done everything that way, and they're not willing to be open-minded enough to move forward. It's kind of like the old saying, what grows on a lake that's frozen over? Nothing. A lot of times that's the way the mind is. If we're not open to new ideas and new concepts of maybe going away to tackle something, we'll never get anything done. You're never any different than anybody else. So our mind really has to be open to some new ideas, really in order for us to advance our lives, to move forward, because without dreams, I'll share something with you. Without dreams, this church wouldn't be here right now. We wouldn't be meeting here this morning. Without dreams, you wouldn't be living up here where you are. How many people, I was just sharing with Luke this morning, we were outside and we were getting the microwave out of my truck, and it was snowing real hard, and we looked out at all the mountains here and how beautiful, and I said, Luke, I dreamed about this for a long time. And here we are standing right here in the middle of the dream. How many of you dreamed about moving up here from somewhere else? I think we all did. So it had to start out with a dream in order for you to be where you are today. Well, it ought to be that way in other areas of our lives also. But without having some type of a dream, some type of a plan, or some type of a goal, you know what you're doing? You're placing limits on God. You're placing limits on the Lord and what He can do for you. So how do we place limits on God? I believe that there's a couple different ways. And one of them is for people, oftentimes, they have a feeling of worthlessness. Now, what do I mean by that? How many times have you talked to somebody and you say, well, why don't you try out for that job? Well, I'm not really qualified to do that kind of work. Well, why don't you, say, teach a Bible study? Well, I'm not really smart enough or haven't been a Christian long enough to do that. Or I can't do that because that's kind of over my head and I really don't have the talent to do that. Or I'm not properly trained, or I don't have the education for it, or I don't have the experience for it. Or here's the biggest one I've heard. I've tried that, but it doesn't work. Now, when we feel that the Lord is calling us to do something in our lives, and we say, well, I've tried that before, but it just doesn't work. Well, when we say that, you know what we're doing? We're paralyzing our success. Because we're planting those seeds in our mind that, no, I cannot do that. So therefore, we don't even make an effort to try to even do it. Our talk of worthlessness really hinders what God can do for us. Basically, when you're saying, when you feel that the Lord gives you a vision, and you say, no, I can't do it, no, I can't do it, no, I'm not worthy enough, no, I'm not good enough. Basically, what you're really saying is, God made me and He made a piece of junk. It's basically what we're saying. Because if the Lord gives you a dream and a vision of something, He's also going to give you the ability to do it. He will never give us a vision without giving us the proper tools to do it with. Look how He's met just a new church like us, but look how He's met every single step along the way. Each time that we step up, we go into a little bit nicer place, a little bit bigger place every time. Every time He allows us the finances to be able to do it. Every time He allows us the people that are able to do the work itself. Now, what if we said, no, we can't do that. We've got money, but we don't want to spend that money on it. Or no, we should do that, but we really don't have the people in here to do it. Well, we never move forward in the vision that the Lord's given us. So we cannot have the attitude that, no, I can't do it. Don't let that type of attitude, that worthlessness, get into your mind. God, He says, He says He created you. Don't you think that we're valuable in His eyes? I don't think God would create us and then leave us abandoned. Not at all. God gives us every bit of the tools that we need to live some type of a victorious life as a Christian. We need that. So besides just that feeling of worthlessness, here's the second reason I wrote down. And by the way, I come up with most of these things just from talking to people throughout the day and asking them about the different things. And the second one was believe in the worst. Most people cannot move forward in their life to do what they feel the Lord's calling them to do because they believe the worst. And what I mean by that, when we listen to the media, and we sit there and we listen to the news all day that keeps saying that we're in a recession, we're in a recession. You know what's going to happen? Think about what people happen. I remember a while back when this first started, when things started getting tough. Everything that was on the news was how high the unemployment rate was, how high that people were out of work, how many homes were being turned in, how many companies were shutting down. And guess what happened? When people keep hearing about how bad times are, guess what they do? They quit buying, companies start laying off, and people start losing confidence. In other words, people start reacting even though it hasn't hit them yet. Everybody would ask me at the barbershop, they would say, has the recession hit you yet? Have you really started to drop down? No. I'm sure it's hit more businesses than maybe what has hit mine, but I'm just going to keep chugging along and just keep moving along as if nothing had happened. But if I turn around and say, well, you know what? I cannot keep the shop open because it runs me more now to keep the heat on. And now that I keep the heat on and they say we got a recession, I'm not going to have as much business. So therefore, I'm going to close down a couple more days a week. How's that beneficial? None. None whatsoever. And as a result, if we're not careful and we listen to the negativity that comes against us, that cycle widens. And the next thing you know, then there really is a recession. Then there really is problems. I remember years ago watching on TV former President Nixon on Larry King. And Larry King had asked him, he says, President Nixon, what is a recession in your eyes? And he answered and he said, a recession is any time people lose confidence in the future and they think that there is no answers. He says that's a recession. And he says if people would quit listening to the media all day, the economy would be much better than what it is. So you and I have to be careful about what we listen to, because if you're not careful about what you listen to, it'll keep you from moving forward. It'll keep you from God being able to use you all that He wants to use you. So number one, that feeling of worthlessness. Number two, the believing the worst. And number three is dwelling on your circumstances. There's no such thing in the eyes of God as a hopeless situation. No such thing in the eyes of the Lord. But people can grow hopeless about their situation, can't we? How many times do you and I look at things and we think, there's no hope in this. There's just no way that this could work. But that's not what the Bible says. The Bible says all things are possible for those who believe. It also says if Christ is with you, who can stand up against you? So now you and I, do we stop and do we look at the economy? Or do we say, I've got the Lord on my side. If the Lord gave me the vision to do something, I can go through and help fulfill that vision because God gave it to me. He's the giver of the dreams, the giver of the vision. But also, if He's with me, how can it not work? And I'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. Because it's the attitude, I believe, that the Lord looks at with us as we go through different situations in life. Because our attitude is more important than our finances. Our attitude is more important than our IQ. And you know what? Our attitude with the Lord is more important than the circumstance that we're in right now. You know, we can't deny our circumstances, but here's the thing. We can refuse to dwell on them. We can refuse to dwell on them. You know, you can really use your mind if you're thinking along the path, along a spiritual type way of thinking. You could take your mind and you can use that to overcome your circumstances. Now, some people say, well, that's positive thinking. Well, to a certain degree it is positive thinking. But who's the giver of the positive thinking? Why did the Lord give us this if He did not want us to think victoriously? Why do we even have this, the Bible? Because this Bible is my map and your map for our life. That whatever situation that we run into, He has an answer. So whenever you start feeling kind of negative and you start feeling kind of down about things, there's things that can help you grow through that area. And here's a couple things I wrote down. Number one is the Bible. Go see what God's Word has to say about your circumstance or the trial it is that you're going through. The second thing is, and this is something that I like to do a lot, and I do it quite a bit, especially now that I've got advanced in the world and I got an MP3 player, even though I'm about 5 years behind in that technical stuff. But I'll tell you what I've been doing is I've been downloading the biographies of successful people. People that have done things in their life that was against the odds. And when you listen to some of these people, do you know what it does? It gives you encouragement. It gives you encouragement. So between the Bible and reading about biographies of successful people and listening to some good Bible teaching and being around people that are a little bit more positive than people that are so negative, you know what? When you start feeding your mind with all that stuff, guess what you do? You'll start to see growth in your life. You'll start to see some of those negative situations that we run into on a daily basis. We'll start to see them not as big in our light. In other words, that light's not as bright on our lives because now you and I have the true light, the light that overcomes all darkness. But we just have to take the time and put these type of things in our mind, positive things, godly things, spiritual things in our lives, because when you and I feed on garbage and we dwell on garbage, guess what happens? We get a little bit on the negative side, won't we? We get a little bit on the negative side, and guess what happens when you start thinking negative like that? We all start saying things and doing things that later on we regret. We all do it. So we need to stop and think about it. My circumstance that I'm in, what can I do to overcome that circumstance? And as I just said, put some good spiritual things, Bible promises in your mind. Sit down and look up some Bible promises. See what God has to say about it. Well, we're probably thinking, well, how do we start doing something like that? All that sounds very good, but how do I start? How do I even go about this? How do I start getting a better attitude about things? And I believe one of the best ways is to start your day out with the Lord. Start your day out. Get out of bed, get dressed, and get your Bible. Let the Bible be before the newspaper. I remember years ago, I've not bought a newspaper in 18 years. Now, I'm not saying don't buy a newspaper because Fridays I get a free one, so I sit and read it. But I'll tell you what I do is I quit reading the newspaper a long time ago because back then I was really into a lot of the Zig Ziglar and the Anthony Robinsons and the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. A lot of the motivational things, me being in the school business, the Bible school business, we had 5 schools, about 275 students. I had about 49 teachers under me and about 300 students. My job was to keep the people going and put in systems into place for all the schools. So I was constantly going to seminars and things like that to try to stay upbeat, where I could go back and give an upbeat to everybody that was underneath me. One of the things that they really encouraged us to do, they said, take 30 days and don't read the first thing they said was, how many of you read a newspaper first thing in the morning? Now keep in mind, I was not a Christian at that time. And he said, how many of you read a newspaper first thing in the morning when you get out of bed? Well, my favorite thing to do back then was get a cup of coffee, get a cigarette, and get the newspaper and sit and read it. Well, by the time I got through with the 2-3 cigarettes and my coffee and newspaper, go take a shower, I was in a bad frame of mind. Because I read about who killed who murdered who stabbed who killed their children, all that type of stuff. What, is that a way to start your day out? So they encouraged us. They said, take 30 days. We're not telling you to quit reading a newspaper, but they're saying take 30 days and don't start your day out like that. Just start your day out on something a little bit more upbeat, and then you would notice, and now being a Christian, I see that the best thing that I could ever read to keep me going is the Bible. Or maybe a daily devotion, or maybe a 1 year, like the daily bread, something along that line that would be putting these positive things of the Lord inside of our mind. You know, and so when we start thinking about all these things that come into us, don't allow the world to close in and mold you into their image. Because that's what they're trying to do. Why is it that you take the newspaper one like what we normally get every day, and you read it, but then they come out with another newspaper, a good news newspaper, and which one sells the most? The regular newspaper's got all the bad stuff in it. People have a tendency to dwell more on negative news than they do good news. They tried coming out with the good news station here about 8-9 years ago, where how we would normally listen to, say, CNN at night or whatever station it may be, and they would spend 20 minutes telling you about who killed who robbed who, and who murdered who. But then they came out with the good news station, they'd give you 20 minutes of all the good things that happened. It didn't last. It didn't last 2-3 months. People have a tendency to dwell on the very negative things. And I don't believe that that's the way for you and I to walk a godly life or have any type of victory in our life, is to constantly be dwelling on the negative type things. You know, when things like that come into our lives, we need to start thinking more positive. We need to start reading the promises of God. My God shall supply all my needs. I like it when Jesus said in John, my peace I leave with you. When we start putting all these different things in our mind, guess what it starts to do? We start our day off in a much, much better way than with the newspaper. But start our day out. When you start your day like this, you'll get excited about the day, because you'll know that the Lord is with you all throughout the day. In other words, plant the soil of your mind with some good thoughts, and the crop that you raise is going to be wholesome. Think about that. You know, we really need it, especially in a stressful age like we live in today. Who was that was saying earlier about all the different things that stress did to people? Somebody was talking about that before church here, about all the different illnesses and the different things that come on to people just strictly because of the stress that people are going through. But positive thinking, it helps give you a victory that you need. So we need to start putting good things in our mind, especially for the new year, because I don't know about you, but I'd like to have a better year in 2010 than what I had in 2009 in every area of my life. One of my goals this year is I'm going to try to not to capture on some of these negative things, and I'm going to try to lose a little bit of weight this year, or get in better shape, I should say. You know, but the only way I'm going to do it is just by reading on things that pertain to me in that area. You know, but something that we need to do is, once we know things that we need to do, but then we really need to define our dreams. Think about the things that we would like to do this upcoming year. Do you have something that you would really like to see God do in your life this year? Whatever it may be. Maybe just take a family vacation. It may be to build an addition onto the house. It may be buy a dream home. Whatever the case may be. But the next stage is we have to make a plan to do it. We have to make plans to do it. God gives the birds food, but guess what? The birds have to go get it. God gives the birds food, but then the birds have to go get it. You can't just sit and do nothing and expect God to do it all. That's where dreams, plans, and goals come into effect in our everyday lives. You show me somebody that doesn't have a dream, and I'll show you somebody that's not getting anywhere in life. They're maintaining. They're staying exactly where they are. But I believe that if we're really realistic, we will all admit that we do want to do better in our lives. And most of the miracles that happen in the Bible is because someone acted upon a command of God, or God gave a prophet a vision, and either the prophet did or the prophet shared with the nation of people, and the people did it. But the thing was they all did something. Suppose that a farmer wants milk, and he realizes, hey, I got to get milk from a cow. Well, they should live where we get milk. But what's going to happen if a farmer just takes that stool and goes out and sits it in the middle of the pasture and just sits and waits for a cow to back up to it? It doesn't work that way, does it? The farmer has to do something the same way with you and I. If we want any type of success in our life, we have to have a dream, and then we have to have plans in order to be able to reach that dream. I know that I was just sharing the last couple of days, and like this morning with Luke, talking about the plans for the building here. What are we going to do next? What are the different areas that we need to start doing to get ready so that when it comes time that we can move in, we've got different plans set up that we can actually start in. Plans on the outside of the building about blocking those bay doors. But we have to start somewhere. We just need to figure out, well, where are we going to start? We have to have a plan of where we're going to start at. If you can't write down your dreams on a piece of paper, you're not going to achieve them. It all starts out just by writing them down. Ask God to guide you. Ask God to make you know what they are. I believe that's the key thing. If you don't know what you're supposed to do, go to the Lord. Pray to the Lord. Say, Lord, what am I supposed to do over this situation? I need for you to show me. Let me know, Lord, that whatever plan it is that you have for me, let me know that it is of you. And not just my own dreams, my own plans, but a God-given dream, a God-given plan. You know, so I believe that that's what we need to do. And here's another thing about that. When you go to the Lord, make sure that whatever your dreams are, your plans are, that they're pure. They have pure motives. They're of the Lord. They're not just for you to gain financially or materially or whatever, but that people could be blessed by it. And the Lord could get glory from it, because it's a lot easier to know who you are, where you are, and where you're going to make your plans. If you know the reason why you want those plans, it's so much more important. Know where you're going. It's interesting because every time I get ready to go down to Florida to visit my family, you go online to book your tickets, and the first thing that it asks you is what? Where are you going? So I have to sit down and figure out, well, I know I'm going to Florida. Well, where's your starting point? Well, then I have to decide, is it going to be Asheville or is it going to be Greenville, Spartanburg? So the reason I'm saying this is then they want to know, where's your destination point? Well, that's the way it ought to be with dreams that we have throughout the year. Where am I going? First of all, what does the Lord want me to do? How do I start this that the Lord has for me? But then how do I know when I'm there? And oftentimes that we won't end up exactly the way we wanted to end up. The Lord has some way of working in our lives and moving us in our lives that ends up a little bit different. But if it's a God-given dream, it doesn't matter to us. We just want to be obedient to the Lord and say, Lord, however you want to guide me, guide me. So as God guides you, we need to be willing. You know, that's the same way it is with dreams. Have a starting point, know where you're going to end up. But here's another thing. Remember where you begin from the Lord. The whole purpose of having a dream or a vision is because we're God's children. And God gives us those dreams. You say, well, how's that? Think about Joseph. Think about Joseph. He had a God-given dream. And his dream kept him going despite all the difficult circumstances that he went through. Remember what happened when Joseph shared with his father, his mother, and his brothers that one day they would worship him? Remember when that happened in Genesis? They didn't like him too much for it, did they? They didn't like him too much for it at all. In spite of all of his brothers' ridicule and everything else, he still kept going after his dream. No matter what happened and who come against him, he still pursued the dream that he felt the Lord had given him, no matter what the circumstances were. Even when Joseph was sold into slavery in the book of Genesis, what happened then? He didn't lose hope. He still seen himself as a great worth, a value to God, that God wanted to use him. He didn't get depressed and discouraged and bummed out and say, Lord, I know you gave me a vision, but I'm just running into too much bad luck. I'm out of here. No, he didn't say that at all. He just kept moving forward. He took charge of his life in a situation. And what was the end result of Joseph's life? That's right. God lifted him up. And did that dream come true? Did his brothers and his family, did they worship him or look up to him? Exactly. But the key reason why I shared that illustration is because you may receive ridicule. As you have a dream or a vision or something that you feel God's wanting you to do, and other people around you are speaking negativity into your life. Oh, you don't believe that's going to work. You tried that a million times. That doesn't work. Even all throughout the Scriptures, we see where God gave people visions and other people wanted to ridicule them, but they just stayed faithful. And those that stayed faithful, the dream came true. The circumstances might have been a little different, what they had hoped for, but the dream came true. The dream came true. If Joseph can do it, why can't you and I do it? Is God a respecter of persons? Is he going to show more favoritism than Joseph than he will you or me? Absolutely not. I believe that as long as you and I, we receive the vision that the Lord gives us and we continue it in consistency and purity, I believe that the Lord would bless you and I the same as He did Joseph. To start on the right path, first thing we have to do is start thinking right. Start thinking right. You know what that may mean? You and I might have to rearrange some mental furniture. Some of our thinking. We might have to start putting things in right perspective and in the right order. The Bible says that as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. Proverbs 23:7. The way that you think determines who you are and what you will become. Think about that. Think about that. Very seldom do I see somebody think negative all the time and do positive things. Usually if you're constantly thinking negative, guess what you're going to do? Negative things. People that are always positive and upbeat and things like that, usually they're the ones that have more joy and share more good things that are going to take place in their lives and in other people's lives. You know, how do we think? Stop and think about this. When circumstances come into your life, how do you think about it? Do you think victory? Do you think answers? Do you think that God's going to help you make it through every challenge that you run through? These are good questions. As we see difficulties coming into our life, are we going to start saying, well, I know that that's an obstacle that's being thrown at me by Satan himself. But here's a way that I can get around that. Here's an answer for that. Lord, I know that you're with me. And he who's with me is stronger than those who are against me. So how do we think when obstacles and challenges come our way? Let me ask you, just think upon that part a little bit more. What if you knew that you could accomplish anything? If you knew that you couldn't fail, would you go for it? God said through the prophet Isaiah 41:10, God says, "Fear not, for I am with thee, and I will strengthen thee." Think about that. That ought to be an encouragement itself. Just the Lord to know that He's with us and He's going to give us strength as we go through whatever it is in life that we're going to go through, that ought to encourage you and I. Proverbs 29:18, it says, where there is no vision, and I believe one of the translations says vision or dream, the people perish. The people perish. Do you have a dream? That's why you and I need to have dreams. And we need to keep our eyes on those dreams that the Lord gives us, because guess what? If you get your eyes off of what the Lord has planned for you, your goals will never get reached when you take your eyes off. Things get muddy, they get fogged up, and you lose sight of what the Lord's given to you. If this happens, you will only begin to see negative situations when we take our eyes off of it. The negative situations, I heard one fellow say that they're just soul termites eating away at you. That's what negative talk is, and negative thoughts. They're just soul termites, just constantly biting away and eating away at you. But if your heart burns with dreams that the Lord's give you, those dreams will come true. But some people are just afraid to dream. They're afraid because of failure in their past. I hear this so much. But we really need to take those failures and things that we've tried to do in the past, take those things that didn't work out and try to make them into a success. Robert Schuller says, turn your scars into stars. I like that. Turn your scars into stars. Most of the people that have done things in life that you and I look up to, they were against the odds. They were against the odds. But people overcame them just because they had a dream that they felt that the Lord had given. What about Thomas Edison? Think about this. When he was interviewed by the New York newspaper, Thomas Edison was asked, how does it feel to fail 700 times trying to invent a filament for an electric light? His answer was, I haven't failed, not even once. However, I can prove that 700 different ways won't work. But what was his outlook? It was great. And as we know, he went on to do it. He actually went on to do it. Think about this. There's a fellow named Louis Pasteur. He received a C grade in chemistry when he was in school. Guess who he is? He's the fellow that developed the process of pasteurization of milk and the cure for rabies. And he made a C in school. Wasn't very smart. Einstein flunked high school math. We're told that he never learned to even tie his shoelaces. But yet, look how he revolutioned science as we know it today. Here's one. J.C. Penney. J.C. Penney, he was sent home from school because he wasn't smart enough to learn to get through the class. J.C. Penney. He's been dead now for several years, and I keep sending him checks. Think about it. These are guys that yet everybody told them they weren't going to make it. What about Colonel Sanders, a good old KFC? Do you know when he was 65 years old, he was flat broke? He didn't have 2 quarters rubbed together. 65. And yet now he's got stores and he's known all over the world. Here's a good one. A lady named Sally Bush. She was a God-fearing woman who lived over a century ago. She had 2 stepchildren, a girl named Sarah and a tall, lanky boy named Abraham. Every Sunday, she faithfully took her children by horseback to a country church. It had a water bucket in the back to get water to drink, a stove in the middle to burn wood to keep it warm, a wooden pulpit, and benches that did not have backs on them to sit in the lengthy preacher's messages. At least we got backs. Everybody's saying comfortable chairs except for Jerry. It says that Abraham listened with interest as the old preacher preached long, hard, and loud. Many years later, when this boy became a man, he stirred the nation with his speech on the Union and slavery. Abraham Lincoln quoted from the Bible. Where did he learn it? From that hard-shell Baptist preacher who knew little more than the Scriptures, but who said it with faith and tear-filled eyes. You can do it with God. And that was the thing that Abraham Lincoln kept stressing to the country and people. You can do it with God. We can do it with God. Now, think about this. Think about the things that Abraham Lincoln went through in life. As I was studying this, I thought, wow. In 1831, he failed in business. 1832, he was defeated for the legislature. 1833, he failed in business again. 1836, he had a nervous breakdown. 1838, he was defeated as the House Speaker. 1840, he was defeated for the elector. 1843, he was defeated for Congress. 1855, he was defeated for the Senate. 1858, he was defeated for the vice presidency. But in 1860, Abraham Lincoln became the 16th president of the United States. Why? When people ask him why did he become the president after all those failures, you know what his answer was? Because he didn't give up. He said, if God's with me, who can be against me? Think about that. After all those different failures, imagine how many people had to come up to him and say, hey, this ain't working, bro. You need to just back off and go out and be a lumberjack or something. But he didn't listen to him. You know, and as I studied this, it just made me think even that much more. You and I need to be like Abraham Lincoln and be like some of these other people that when people tell you things that are going to try to destroy your dreams and your visions that the Lord's given to you, you don't need to listen to them. You're going to take some ridicule from them, but we're not to listen to those people that talk to us. Remember what Joseph shared his dream with his brothers? And when they heard it, how one day they would bow down, it says that they had outrage and hatred and anger towards Joseph. So that when you feel that God's given you a vision to do something, other people come against you, don't be surprised. But we need to be like Abraham and not give up. You know, so many dreams become destroyed because other people want to come in and give them all the negativity about what they're doing. But I want to share something with you. This can only happen one way. And that's if you let them do it. If you let them do it. I remember when I was going through seminary school, we had a fellow that was teaching a class, and this guy was probably, the seminary school that I went to was, I really enjoyed it very much because every month we had a different pastor or minister, a different college professor. We had people from all over the world that came into our school, and they taught once a month on whatever subject it was. If we were on the book of Corinthians, these people had written a book on Corinthians, on a commentary. Either way, but I remember this guy coming in, and he's the one that stood out probably the most to me the whole time I was in school. And he shared that when he was starting out in the ministry as a real young guy, him and his wife, he started out pastoring a church and just couldn't make it. And he was working a job, traveling during the week, trying to do revivals, trying to do different things for the Lord, but at the same time support his wife and 2 kids. So they had a van actually. They had a van and they were traveling around the country in the van. The van kept breaking down. Finally, he found a car dealer that would give him a little mini motor home for them to travel in. Because keep in mind, there's 4 of them. They were music ministry. They were carrying drums, guitars, organs, all this stuff. So they had to have like a little minivan to travel around in to carry everything. But as they were going through, it just kept breaking down. And next thing you know, when it was breaking down, sooner or later, their bills started adding up to more than what was coming in. Well, it's hard to live that way. And so he talked about one day how they were somewhere out Midwest, and it broke down, and he couldn't get it started. And by now, I think he said he had 3 or 4 kids by now. Couldn't get it started, so he had to call an RV place. They came and towed his RV in. So they towed it in, and they had to sleep in the lobby area of the place where they were working because they didn't have the money for a motel. And he says, do you want what it's like to have your wife and 3 or 4 kids with you, and you ask if you could sleep in the lobby? But while they were working on it, he was walking around the lot and looking at the other motorhomes. And he said to his wife, he said, this is the one that we need right through here. And it was a silver coach. He said the funny part about it was, after all these years of him and his family ministering all these different crusades, he met 2 different types of people. He said, but then he stepped back and he said, while I was in that RV place, they had a card of different pictures of different motorhomes. He said, when I seen this Silver Eagle, I picked it up. It was a free card, and it was to plant a seed in your mind that this is the one you want to buy. Just like what we get in the mail every month from car dealers and people like that. He said he took that card to that Silver Eagle. He took it, and when he got back inside of his mini motorhome, he took the picture and he pasted it on the dash so that all day as he was driving this, he would look and that was his dream. This is the honest truth. And he says that while we were traveling throughout the years, he says, I met 2 kinds of people. He said we'd have one group of people that would go in there and say, hey, what is that photo that you have on the dash? He said, well, that's my dream of a new motor coach, a Silver Eagle that we're looking at. One group would look at him and they'd say, wow, do you know what that cost? You'll never be able to afford that. His answer to them was, it doesn't matter what the new coach costs because I don't have any money anyway. But it's a dream. And they'd say, well, you're just not going to be able to afford that. And he says, well, I just feel that maybe someday the Lord will provide it. And he said, but then here is what changed his life. Was they stopped at a church and was doing a crusade at a church. And when they went back out to their crusade that night to sleep, that's where they slept, was inside of it. The pastor of the church walked out to him and was talking to him and had brought him some food that was left over because they had, back then the revivals, everybody brought a covered dish. And after the revival, they all sat and ate and fellowship together. He said that they brought him the food to keep so they could take it with them the next day. And the pastor looked at the dash and he said, what is that on the dash? He says, that's my dream motorhome. And he said, the pastor looked at him dead in the face and he says, do you have the money for it? He said, no. He said, do you even have a fund started for it? He said, no. He said, the pastor said, I'll be right back. Went inside the church, come back out, took a check, and wrote a check for $100 and says, start this towards your dream home. And he says, wow, I never had anybody even tell me to do something like that. I never even thought about it. So he turned around and he started up, and he says that they started, when they were doing the crusades and revivals, they would show up, 2 pictures, one is what they were driving, and the other one what they were filled the Lord had called them. And he says within 2 years, they had enough funds that come in to buy that. Up and above their cost of living. But the whole purpose of him telling that was for 2 reasons. Number one was to don't let those negative people ridicule and tell you that you can't do something. Just because they don't have the vision for you. He says, be careful and look out for people. He said, the second thing is, whatever your dream is, share with others your dream. Because oftentimes, your dream that you have, the vision that you have for you or your family, oftentimes it's going to require other people to get involved in it. It's going to require other people to get involved in it in order for it to come true. But I thought that was great how he shared that. And I was fortunate enough, I got to hear him teach about 4 or 5 different occasions. And it was just powerful hearing to him. But his dream was a dream that included doing the Lord's work too. So keep that in mind. Think about another person. I'm going to finish up here in a minute. Think about another person. What about Walt Disney? Now, we all know him. You know, building a place where parents could take their family, have fun together. But Walt's brother tried to discourage him, saying that, you know what, Walt, it cannot be done. People, first of all, having a building like that or a park is going to be expensive to maintain. Parents are not going to pay just to come sit with Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck. So Walt Disney listened to all the reasons why people tell him that he should not do things. But let me ask you a question. What is Walt Disney's brother's name? Nobody, does it even matter? No, because he didn't do anything. But yet we remember who Walt Disney is. Matter of fact, last year, I think it was the second or third quarter, Walt Disney showed, here we are in a recession, supposedly. Here we are in a recession, but yet Disney World is showing record high profits. Even though we're in a recession, these theme parks are just exploding at the seams. So here Disney, Walt Disney's dream, it came to pass, still continues to grow because he refused to let someone destroy his dream. And here's the last 2 things. I believe that there's a couple of things just really necessary if we want to have our dreams come true. Number one, I think, is to have a positive attitude about it. You know, our attitudes should not allow people to speak negativity into our lives. We should not allow them to speak that. A positive attitude does not refuse to recognize problems. It just refuses to dwell on the problems. I mean, we know as a church, we've had our share of problems, but we can't dwell on the problems. We just have to move forward and continue moving forward for the Lord. You know, if your thoughts are happy, guess what the Bible says? Sooner or later, you'll become happy. What goes in eventually comes back out. We know that. But the second thing is besides having a good attitude, a positive attitude about it, to have your dreams come true, the second thing is, here it is, be prepared to modify your dreams. Be prepared to modify them. You know, some dreams really aren't practical and possible in the original form that we feel that the Lord gave it to them. You know, they may need some modification before they can actually come about. You know, God would never give us a vision of a dream without giving us the ability to be able to go through with that dream that He's given us to do in the first place. Think about this. As a baby learns to walk, practice improves skill. The first time that little baby falls down, do we say, okay, that's it. You're never going to try that again? Did we say that to him? No, not at all. You know, the baby's going to fall many, many times before they can learn to walk on their own in a proficient way. What about when you became a Christian and you started your walk with the Lord? Did your footsteps sometimes falter? Do they still falter sometimes? Exactly. We all do. But here's the thing, the longer that you and I walk with the Lord, the longer that we try to walk in His paths, hopefully the more mature that we become with the Lord. And the more mature that you and I become with the Lord, the more that our love ought to grow deeper for the Lord. And as we do that, as my walk and your walk grows with the Lord, guess what the Lord says? I've got a plan for you. But my plan is for you to do this or do that. And then you and I are then to step up to the plate with that plan. I heard one guy say that he was a church planner, and it was interesting because the other day he was saying that he has he has started 11 churches. I pray for him. Not one of the 11 ended up the way that he originally started. But all 11 are up and growing and vital to the community and reaching out to the community. But not a single one of them ended up the way it started. That's the way it is with our lives. We have to be ready to alter things, just like whenever we let the other building know that we said we're going to do a Saturday night service for a while until we can find a place. Well, that was not our original dreams, was to start on Saturday nights from the start, but we had to get sidetracked and get in order to come over here because this place wasn't available at that time. So the Lord would steer our paths a little bit, and what you and I may think is an off path, but it's not really an off path. While He's got us over here, He's working over there, getting prepared for you and I to come and do things. So we have to be prepared that as the Lord leads us in our walk with Him, there's going to be areas that's not going to end up the way that we thought it would be. But all He asks is that we stay faithful and don't give up. Just stay faithful and don't give up. Someone said there's plenty of splinters on the ladder of success. But then somebody else says, yeah, but you don't ever notice them unless you slide down. Think about that. But it's up to you and I, each person, to, get that dream from the Lord and feed on them and water those dreams and just continue on in our walk with Him. And, I just want to encourage you, because I know I'm trying to do it in my own life, is throughout this year, 2010, be thinking about what the Lord would have you do in your walk with Him. And let's go through and pray to the Lord and just thank Him for His goodness.